Serious? What revenge of yours hit the victim way worse than you thought it would, to the point you said maybe I shouldn't have done that? Had a roommate who basically let his new GF move into our house in college. She helped herself to everything in the house but never contributed. Finally she parked in my parking spot and that was my breaking point. I let all the air out of all of her tires, thinking she'd just air them back up and it would be an inconvenience. Instead she ended up buying all new tires. Whoops. Never came clean about it. She's an idiot. Back in middle school a friend of mine threw a small wadded piece of paper at me. I retaliated by throwing the only thing I could find, which was mud close to my shoes. Smacked him right in the face with it. Worst part is, it turned out to be dog shit that was at the bottom of my shoe. I still vividly remember his angry "WTF man, I throw paper at you and you throw dog shit?" When I was little my friends kept pointing at the little girl on the box of the board game Operation and saying it looks like me. So I pointed at the big fat guy and said that's your mom and didn't realize she was behind me. My older brother was always quite horrible to me as a child and my parents never really did much about it. He was also much bigger than me so I couldn't retaliate in a physical way cause I would be swiftly crippled cross-faced walls of Jericho. One day I had just had enough. My revenge? He had been playing Rome Total War for a good 6 hours a day for about 3 weeks. I started a new game and overwrote his save file. Never seen fury like it. I regretted it at the time cause he was so angry it scared me and it made him dislike me even more, but now I praise my 13-year-old self for hitting him where it clearly hurt most. Edit. Some of you are asking how our relationship is now. It's okay. I moved away as soon as I hit 18 so I didn't see much of the family for some years. He was a brick, but his choice of submission moves was excellent. I think I have told this before, but I think I was 15 and was in class and sat next to a friend of mine. He, for no reason, began to say, "Haha, your bald father," which I followed up with, "Haha, your bald mother." He started crying and ran to the teacher. I honestly forgot his mom had cancer and was getting chemo. IDK what it was. But a lot of the boys in my 6th grade class thought it was hilarious to try and trick people. They'd get your ass no matter how careful you were. Well, I was pretty good at avoiding it. But when I was in gym class this kid named Joey got my ass hard. I was dribbling down court and he nailed me. I face planted hard. So I thought about how to get him. And I got him at lunch. He was holding a lunch tray, so his hands weren't as useful. He nailed a table and lost a tooth. I got suspended for 10 days. And a strict no tripping policy got implemented. Immediate suspensions if caught. Sheet sucked. My dad beat my ass raw. Sorry, Joey. This one is not as serious or entertaining as most of the answers you'll find here. But when we were kids, my sister threw water at me and ran away, so I picked up my glass of water and ran after her. I threw the water from the glass at her once I had her cornered. Unfortunately the glass had slipped out of my hand and it hit her right across her face. She got bruised and cut pretty bad. I bet she never threw water at you again. A roommate poured water on me while I was asleep. So I filled all his shoes and the pockets of all his trousers with chili powder. I didn't realize the powder had dyed and it stained everything red, including any shirts he had tucked into work trousers and a lot of items he washed with them. I'm guessing he didn't pour water on you again. I guess revenge implies thinking out the act or some time between acts. But at the age of 14 I was rolling up the hose in my backyard with a friend since my mother told me to. The 2 girls next door were playing in their backyard and come over to talk. One 12 or so, the other 7. The 12-year-old happened to be standing on the hose. And I asked her to move. She did not. I pulled the hose hard enough to make her fall over. At this point the 7-year-old screamed bloody murder and ran right at me. And bit my right on the stomach. She was not letting go. And I could see blood starting to stain my shirt. I grabbed her head and tried to pull her away. But nothing. So I just full on punched her right in her eye. I am not proud of this. But it had to be done. What was worse? is that the house was owned by a local church where I happened to go to Boy Scouts. Everyone quickly knew I had punched a 7-year-old and given her a black eye. But no one cared why. When I was a kid I was at a local river, a great swimming spot lots of people came to. My friend pushes me in the river and naturally I came up spluttering and a little red in the face. But it was all in good fun. For the rest of the day I planned to get her back, waiting for my opportunity to push her in. Until she was at the edge of the river drying off. I pushed her. But her flailing and the slippery nature of the rocks she was on made her slip on the spot. And instead of just splashing into the water, she landed on her back hitting the rocks hard. And then fell into the water. She was winded. But thankfully otherwise unharmed. Our parents were furious at me. And I just spent the few seconds it took to get her out. Felt like a lot longer to me. Just hoping I hadn't broken her back or something. 2/10 revenge. Would not do again. Edit. Wow, this really blew up. I hope we have all learned not to push people into pools and other bodies of water. Reminds me of a somewhat similar story. Me and some friends rented a house including a pool. One of their kids was quite annoying with his water pistol and I told him to quit multiple times. Instead of being the adult and ignore it, I picked him up and threw him in the pool. Or that was the idea. The kid somehow held onto my arm, cancelling out some of the momentum, and he hit the metal pool stairs. He cried and it was obvious I was responsible. So there I was. A guy mid-20s trying to explain why he made a 9-year-old cry. I was 11. My older brother was 16. We would fight and argue, but one time I was running up the stairs away from him and he whipped the back of my legs with a long rubber chew toy. It left a pretty big figure-8-shaped welt on my legs. I knew he was faster and stronger than me and I knew if I tried to attack him he'd stop me. So I grabbed a flathead screwdriver and held it over the stove until it was red hot. I ran up to him and very openly went to stab him. Knowing he'd stop me, he grabbed my wrist to stop my thrust, as anticipated, and I pushed the red hot head of it into his forearm as hard as I could. Man. I was a crazy asshole as a kid. Sorry Mike. Edit. Wow. Didn't expect this much response to my weird childhood story. Yes. He had a scarf for years. I will never forget the sound of his scream. I felt terrible. Good news. We are now super close. I was the best man at his wedding and am godfather to one of his kids. Everything's great between us now. A neighbor lady was mean to me, so I went into the laundry room after her and sheet on her clothes in the washer. I was 5. I'll let you off because you were 5. But you should have waited and shat on her clothes in the dryer. I was dating this girl and my friend saw her around town a few times. And humiliated her in an effort to embarrass me. I told him to stop bothering her. But he did it again. That night I convinced him to try getting back together with his wildly insane and manipulative ex that he hadn't spoken to in years. Thinking that he would just humiliate himself by trying. Well, they banged and got back together for a while. And had a baby. Now they're terrible single parents. Jesus. I think the consequences from this one are the worst in the thread. When I was bullied by some local kids, I filled the petrol tank of their family car with grass, dirt, sticks and stones, bottle caps. Pretty much anything I could jam into the petrol tank. I felt sorry for that poor car. Was it a particularly expensive one? When I was in 9th grade, a kid ruthlessly bullied me for a few months. I had gotten sick of it and devised a plan for revenge. Every Wednesday we would get to sit outside for quiet reading time and this kid would always go back inside for a piss. I had left and waited in the bathroom for him, peeking into the stall for his shoes to appear. He came in the bathroom, took his piss, then played on his Game Boy for the rest of reading time. The bell rang and he walked out to the crowded stairwell still looking down at his Game Boy. I bumped into him. He fell face first down the stairs. Knocked out 4 front teeth. Everyone on the stairs assumed he fell because he was playing his Game Boy. I feel pretty bad about it. Edit. I identified him by his shoes. Used the bathroom as a place to pick up his trail. The bathroom he used was on the second floor since it was the closest one to the door near where we were at outside. I knew he would have to use a set of stairs to go back down to his next class. One we had together. But I didn't know which one. I'm still mad at myself for this. When I was a preteen, my friend and I went to one of those day camps that picked us up in yellow school buses. One of the other kids on our bus was a younger boy I'll refer to as Eli. Eli was a ducking terror. He would scream and spit and hump things, make a mess, and be as annoying and insufferable as possible. Riding the bus with him was a nightmare for everyone involved most of the time. So I came up with this idea. I found his family in the phone book and called up pretending to be a camp counselor. I told his mom that he was misbehaving on the bus and that he would either be disciplined or kicked out of the camp if he didn't stop. She bought it. Said she would talk to him about it. I felt so ducking smart. Until the next day. When a quiet, sullen Eli showed up with a black eye. Edit. Apparently a lot of you don't believe that a preteen could convincingly sound like a camp counselor over the phone. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe the static of our connection made my fake adult voice more convincing. Or Eli's parents were really gullible. Or they were just looking for any old excuse to beat up their kid. I don't remember the precise details of a conversation I had like 17 years ago. But I really did call his family. And he really did show up with a black eye the next day. If I were going to lie about this, I'd have probably come up with a cooler story. Anecdotally, it seems that the reason the kids are acting out is because the parenting is bad. And then when you try to alert the parents, you get, as is consistent, a bad parenting response. Co-worker and I had a friendly prank war spanning 2 years. Close to the end of our war, he iced my car. Icing involves taking the hose to the parking lot every half hour and spraying a light mist over your victim's car when it's below 0 out. I finished my 12-hour shift to find a car encased in 2 inches of ice. My revenge was, I thought, both more inconvenient for him and less freezing my gonads off for me. I decided to take a bed sheet, drape it over his car, and only took 4 or 5 trips out with the hose the next night. So the next morning he finds his car with a 1/4 inch of ice freezing a sheet to his car. When he started peeling off the sheet, he pulled his windshield wipers, arms and all off of his ratty Jeep. I got a very pissed off phone call. I felt bad. The unwritten rule was embarrassing or inconvenient. No damage. I paid for repairs. And he got his revenge. He planted a dozen pieces of smoked herring throughout my car. Took me 6 months to find the last piece. Hidden under the carpet under the back window of my car. I can still smell it. I don't even own the car anymore. Lasting smells definitely sounds like permanent damage. That will trash your car's market value. Yikes. When my friends and I were young, middle school or elementary age, there was this pair of sisters in our class. They were the epitome of a teacher's pet, helped because their mother was the assistant teacher, and whenever the teachers would leave they would snitch on everyone. Sometimes if they didn't like you they would make shit up and you would get in trouble still. My friends and I were quite annoying, so we obviously got blamed for shit that we didn't do. No matter what we did, we were never believed in our innocence. So we did the logical thing of talking to every other student in the class and they shared our opinion of how much we all didn't like these girls. Everybody was fed up with their shit. So we wrote a paper stating the shitty things these girls were doing and how everyone didn't like them and so on. We then got about 90% of our classmates to sign this paper. Then we gave it to the principal. I'm not 100% sure what happened next. But I do remember the principal coming into our class after recess and she began to ask if this paper was true and so forth, and everyone who signed it agreed. A few days later these girls were kicked out of school, or maybe they left due to humiliation. Parents decided to pull them from the school. Their mother was still the assistant teacher and she was crying about the whole thing, and she was saying things about how we are horrible and how could we lie about our angels. I felt a bit bad, but I was quite happy that those girls were no longer there because they were mean and massive liars. Edit. Clarification as to why they left. Edit 2. Keep in mind that this happened several years ago. when I was pretty young. So my memory for it all may be distorted. I'm just retelling what I remember of the events as well as I can. Had a big group of friends from 13-18. When we were 17. One of them stole my girlfriend. To be fair, he legitimately knew we were going out. He got her drunk and shagged her at a party. He knew I'd find out. Said to my face he didn't care. Tough shit. Mate. It was her fault as well. Of course. She wasn't passed out or anything like that. She'd been leading him on. And was sober enough to consent. If drunk enough to get over the social stigma of actually doing it. So from that point on, our group of friends just cut this guy out of our circle. We stopped inviting him to stuff. If he tried to hang out, we told him to piss off. Mates that had been friends with him since primary school just ignored him. Initially, I was super proud of this show of solidarity from my bros. My best mate was actually dating my now ex-girlfriend's best mate. And he split up with her because of her attitude about the whole thing. Trying to defend her friend to him. And make him hang out with them as a foursome. So, first summer back from uni. We're all 19-20. We see him in a local pub. I don't know what to do. Decide to try and be cool about it. And go up to say hi. He tells me to duck off. I guess he blames me for all his friends cutting him out of his life. I don't get the chance to explain that I in no way asked them to do that. They just did what they saw as the right thing. 2 weeks later, we're in the same pub. And I see his younger sister. She's 17 now. Very, very attractive. I start a conversation with her about her brother. And how I feel bad about what we did. She says that it did really hurt him. But he's got some new friends now, mostly from uni, and is still with my ex. Despite a long distance relationship over the uni semesters. He won't talk to any of us old friends though. Which I think is a genuine shame. He's known some of the guys since we were 5. One drink leads to another with this girl. And we end up back at her house. Her parents are away. Her brother is staying at my ex's flat. She has her own flat, didn't go to uni. Got a job. So empty house. We end up shagging. Next morning. Her bro calls round just as I'm leaving. The look on his face as he works out what's happened. He goes from utter despair to absolutely mental in about half a second. Eventually I just had to leave. His sister finally managed to explain to him that it was nothing to do with revenge or anything. And that I was genuinely sorry for how we treated him. I don't know if she told him the whole conversation we had about how I'd feel bad as I didn't want to upset him anymore. And she convinced me to come back to hers by saying she was her own woman. Could make her own decisions. And he wasn't due to be home at any time. If he hadn't have randomly turned up. I hope he'd have never known. He still won't accept my Facebook friend request though. Edit, to clarify a few little bits. And I believe it is customary to thank the kind stranger for my first ever edit gold. Thank you very much. When I was in 5th grade my teacher gave out a shit ton of homework one day so I got the whole class to help me write a letter to the principal. She found out and cried and shit. I felt really horrible because she was just trying to get us ready for a test coming up. I still feel really bad every time I think about it. Way back in elementary school a friend threw a piece of chalk that hit me square in the forehead. It was the most humiliating moment for younger me as everyone who saw that started laughing their asses off. Kids are assholes. I plotted and planned my revenge. To get back in the exact same fashion over the next couple of days. One fine day weapon in hand. I find him perfectly placed a chalk throw away from me. I yell out his name and quickly launch the projectile as he spins around. For some reason he had his mouth open as he looked at me and the piece of chalk flew directly into his throat. His eyes widen and he starts choking. I stood frozen in shock as he fell on his knees coughing. Luckily somebody grabbed him from behind and thumped his back. So he swallowed the piece. An adult walks in. Cannot remember who it was at the time. But she looks at me and asks what happened. At this point I'm shaking realizing that I narrowly killed my friend. I say it was a mint. My friend, also shaken at this point, laughs it off saying it went straight into his throat and he didn't taste it. The adult shakes her head and says next time just hand it like a normal person and walks away. Years later when we were moving away to another country I remind him about the incident and come clean about the whole thing. He snaps and yells I knew it.